March 1943. Republic Aviation's factory floor in Farmingdale, New York, hummed with the sound of welding torches and riveting hammers. Every P-47 Thunderbolt that rolled off the line was a promise to the boys fighting overseas. But today, one engineer was about to break that promise in the most unexpected way. James Holloway stood in the testing hangar, staring at the massive four-bladed propeller of the newest P-47. At 32, he'd already earned a reputation for solving impossible problems. But what he was about to do would either make him a legend or destroy everything he'd built. "You're going to do what?" Lieutenant Colonel Richard Stanton stepped closer, his voice sharp with disbelief. "Cut it," James said, his hand trembling slightly as he touched the propeller blade. "Cut two of the four blades completely off." Stanton's face went red. "That's a $50,000 propeller, Holloway. You want to mutilate it based on what? A hunch?" "Not a hunch, sir." James pulled a folded paper from his pocket, calculations he'd been working on for 3 weeks, late at night when no one else was watching. "The drag coefficient—" "I don't care about your math," Stanton interrupted. "I care about the 200 pilots waiting for these planes. You sabotage this aircraft, and I'll have you court-martialed." James felt the weight of the classified report hidden in his desk drawer. The one he wasn't supposed to have. The one that showed German engineers were already experimenting with reduced blade counts. If he revealed where his inspiration came from, he'd face espionage charges. If he stayed silent and failed, men would die flying inferior machines. "Give me 48 hours, James said quietly. "If I'm wrong, I'll resign." Stanton stared at him for a long moment. "You've got 24. And Holloway," he leaned in close, "your father-in-law already thinks you're reckless. Don't prove him right." The mention of Margaret's father sent a chill through James. General Harrison had made it clear. One more controversial decision, and James would be transferred to a desk job far from anything that mattered. But this mattered more than his career, more than his marriage. He'd seen the combat reports. American fighters were being outrun, outmaneuvered. Boys barely old enough to shave were dying because their planes couldn't match enemy speed. "Get me a hacksaw," James said to the mechanic standing nearby, "and clear this hangar, no witnesses." As the sun set through the hangar's high windows, James raised the saw to the propeller blade. His hands had stopped shaking. Whatever happened next would change everything. But neither the colonel nor James knew that someone else was watching from the shadows, someone who'd been waiting for exactly this moment. Before we discover what happened when James made that first cut, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. We love connecting with history enthusiasts from around the world, and your stories remind us why these forgotten moments matter so much. Now, as darkness fell over the factory, James took a breath and began to cut. The hacksaw's teeth bit into the metal with a sound that made James wince. Each stroke felt like cutting into his own future. In the dim light of the hangar, the propeller blade slowly separated from its base. "Stop!" A woman's voice echoed through the empty space. James jerked back, nearly dropping the saw. Catherine Wells emerged from behind a stack of engine crates, her engineer's coveralls stained with oil, her expression a mixture of alarm and something else, curiosity. "How long have you been there?" James demanded. "Long enough to know you're either brilliant or insane." Catherine approached slowly, her eyes fixed on the half-cut blade. "I heard your argument with Stanton. You really think a two-blade design will work?" "It has to." James wiped sweat from his forehead. "The four-blade configuration creates too much rotational inertia. We're losing 30 knots of top speed." "Or," Catherine said carefully, "you crash-test this theory, destroy a $50,000 propeller, and spend the rest of the war stamping requisition forms in Nevada." James studied her face. Catherine had joined Republic Aviation 6 months ago, one of the few women engineers the company had hired. She was sharp, maybe too sharp. He'd caught her asking questions about classified projects before. "Why are you really here, Catherine?" She pulled a folded document from her pocket. James's stomach dropped as he recognized it. The German intelligence report. The one that should have been locked in his desk. "You took that from my office?" "No," she said softly. "I received the same report, from the same source." The hangar suddenly felt colder. "That's impossible. Those documents are eyes only. For senior engineers with security clearance, yes." Catherine's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "But what if I told you I'm not the only one who has it? What if I told you someone in this facility is feeding information to people who shouldn't have it?" James's mind raced. "You think there's a spy? I think there's something worse than a spy. I think there's someone who wants you to build this propeller and fail spectacularly. That doesn't make sense. Why would anyone want our fighters to be slower?" Catherine stepped closer, her voice urgent. 3 weeks ago, an engineer at Curtiss Wright proposed a similar blade reduction. His test plane crashed during the first flight. Catastrophic failure. They blamed him for faulty calculations. I heard about that. Structural fatigue in the propeller hub, that's what the official report said. Catherine's eyes locked with his. But I knew him. Thomas was meticulous. He wouldn't have missed something that obvious. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying someone wanted that test to fail, and now you're about to do the exact same modification." She gestured to the half-cut blade. "Same design, same specifications. Don't you think that's a remarkable coincidence?" James felt ice forming in his chest. "If you're right, then cutting this propeller could kill you. Or worse, could kill every pilot who flies a plane with your design." Outside, footsteps echoed on the concrete. Heavy boots, multiple people. "Someone's coming," Catherine hissed. "If they find us here together, they'll know we've been comparing notes." James looked at the propeller, then at the hacksaw in his hand, then at Catherine's frightened face. "What do I do?" Catherine backed toward the shadows. "Finish the cut, but change one variable, something small that no one else would notice. If I'm right and someone sabotaged Thomas's design, they'll expect you to fail in the same way. Don't give them that satisfaction." The footsteps grew louder. "And James," Catherine paused at the edge of darkness. "Don't trust anyone, not Stanton, not your father-in-law, not even your wife." She vanished between the crates just as the hangar door burst open. 2 military police officers stood silhouetted in the doorway, their faces grim. "James Holloway," the first one called out, "you need to come with us, now." The MP's hand rested on his sidearm. James set down the hacksaw slowly, his mind calculating exits, excuses, explanations, none of them good. "Is there a problem, Sergeant?" "Your wife is in the hospital, sir." "There's been an accident." The world tilted. "What happened?" "Car ran off the road near the airfield perimeter. She's asking for you." James ran. 20 minutes later, he burst through the hospital doors, still wearing his oil-stained work clothes. Margaret sat upright in the emergency room bed, a bandage on her forehead, her father, General Harrison, standing beside her like a sentinel. "James." Margaret's voice was steady, but her hands shook. "I'm fine, just a cut." "What happened?" James reached for her, but Harrison stepped between them. "That's what I'd like to know," the general said coldly. "My daughter says her brakes failed. Complete failure. The mechanic says the brake lines were cut, cleanly, deliberately." James felt the blood drain from his face. "Someone tried to kill her, or send you a message." Harrison's eyes bored into him. "What are you involved in, Holloway?" "I don't know what you mean." "Don't lie to me." Harrison pulled him into the hallway away from Margaret. "I've been in military intelligence for 20 years. I know when someone's being targeted. What's this about a propeller modification?" "How do you know about that?" "I know everything that happens at Republic Aviation. It's my job." Harrison's voice dropped dangerously low. "Now, you're going to tell me exactly what you're doing in that hangar, and you're going to tell me who gave you classified German intelligence reports." James's throat went dry. "Sir, I can explain." "Can you explain why my daughter almost died today? Can you explain why an engineer at Curtiss Wright died last month working on the same project?" Harrison grabbed James's collar. "Whatever you've stumbled into, it's bigger than propellers, and it's gotten people killed." Then let me finish what I started. Let me build the propeller the right way. You're done." Harrison released him. "Effective immediately, you're reassigned. Montana. Training command. You'll never touch an experimental aircraft again. You can't do that. The project killed Thomas Wheeler. It nearly killed my daughter. And it will kill you if you're stupid enough to continue." James's mind raced back to Catherine's warning. What if that's exactly what someone wants? What if they're trying to stop the modification because it actually works? Harrison paused, his expression unreadable. "Then you've made enemies with resources and reach, the kind that cut brake lines, the kind that arrange accidents." "Dad!" Margaret appeared in the hallway, unsteady on her feet. "What's going on?" "Nothing, sweetheart. Just discussing James's new assignment." "No." Margaret's voice cut through the tension. "No more lies. No more secrets." She looked at James, her eyes fierce despite the pain. "Whatever you're doing, it's important enough that someone wants to stop you. That means you're close to something real." "Margaret," Harrison started, "I'm not a child anymore." She turned to her father. "And I'm not a pawn in whatever game you're playing. If James says this matters, then it matters." Harrison's face hardened. "You don't understand what you're asking. I understand that my husband is trying to save lives. I understand that you're trying to protect me, but I'd rather be at risk supporting something that matters than safe doing nothing." James stared at his wife, seeing a strength he'd forgotten was there. "There's something I need to tell both of you," James said quietly. "About the German report. About Thomas Wheeler. About what's really happening at Republic Aviation." But before he could continue, the hospital lights flickered once, twice, then went completely dark. In the darkness, James heard a voice whisper close to his ear. "You should have stayed in the hangar." A gunshot shattered the silence. "Otatis statum." James threw himself over Margaret as the second shot splintered the wall where his head had been. Harrison's service pistol was already drawn, returning fire toward the emergency exit. Muzzle flashes lit the corridor in strobe-like bursts. "Move!" Harrison shoved them toward a supply closet. They stumbled through the darkness, Margaret gasping in pain as her injured head struck the doorframe. James pulled her inside as a third bullet whined past, close enough to feel its heat. "Stay down!" Harrison positioned himself at the door, his breathing controlled, professional. The shooting stopped, emergency lighting flickered on, casting everything in dim red. "They're gone," Harrison said after a long moment, "but they'll be back." "Who?" Margaret clutched James's arm. "Who's doing this?" "Someone with access to military facilities." Harrison ejected his pistol's magazine, checking rounds. "Someone who knew exactly where we'd be." James's mind clicked through the evening's events with sudden clarity. The MPs. They knew to find me in the hangar. They knew about Margaret's accident before anyone could have reported it. "That's impossible," Harrison said. "Those men have been with base security for—" "How long?" James interrupted. "Since when?" Harrison's face went pale. 3 months. They replaced 2 men who were transferred. Transferred or disappeared. James pulled the German intelligence report from his jacket. "This document. It's not just classified. It's bait. Someone's been distributing it to engineers working on high-speed propeller designs. Thomas Wheeler had one. Catherine Wells has one. Probably a dozen others." "Why?" Margaret asked. "To identify who's smart enough to solve the problem and eliminate them before they succeed." The implications hung in the air like smoke. Harrison's radio crackled to life. "General Harrison, this is Base Command. We've got a situation at Republic Aviation. Fire in the main hangar. Your presence requested immediately." James was already running. If you're enjoying this journey into one of World War II's most dangerous secrets, hit that subscribe button and share this story with anyone who loves untold history. These moments shaped our world, and they deserve to be remembered. Now let's see what's waiting in that burning hangar. By the time they reached the factory, flames were already consuming the testing hangar's roof. Fire crews battled the blaze, but James could see it was too late. Everything inside would be destroyed. The propeller, the P-47, all evidence of his work. No, no, no. He tried to rush forward, but Harrison held him back. "Let it burn," Harrison said. "If you're right about this being sabotage, whoever did it will think they've won." "They have won!" James stared at the inferno. "That was the only prototype, the only proof that the design works." "Does it?" A familiar voice came from behind them. Catherine Wells stepped out of the shadows, soot-stained and carrying a large metal case. She set it down carefully and opened it. Inside, nestled in foam padding, was the two-bladed propeller, intact, undamaged, completely removed from the burning hangar. "How?" James started. "I went back after you left. Had a feeling something like this might happen." Catherine smiled grimly. "Turns out I was right. Found two men pouring accelerant around the P-47. They didn't see me take this first." "Who were they?" Harrison demanded. "Never seen them before, but they had Republic aviation badges. Real ones, not forgeries." She looked at James. "Your theory about internal sabotage, it goes higher than you think." Harrison's radio crackled again. "General, we've identified the fire's point of origin. Someone cut the fuel lines in the P-47's tanks. Deliberate arson. And, sir, we found a body in the wreckage." James felt his stomach drop. "Who?" "Lieutenant Colonel Richard Stanton, shot twice in the chest before the fire started," Margaret gasped. Catherine's face went white. But Harrison's expression hardened into something cold and calculating. "James," he said quietly, "how many people knew you were working in that hangar tonight?" "Just Stanton and—" James stopped, realization hitting like a punch. "And whoever was watching from the shadows." "Then whoever killed Stanton knows you're still alive, knows Catherine saved the propeller, and knows we're all standing here right now making us targets," Catherine finished. "We're all targets." As if to confirm her words, the fire suddenly exploded outward in a massive fireball, sending the crowd scattering. In the chaos and screaming, James saw a figure standing at the far edge of the firelight, watching them, not fleeing. The figure raised a hand in a slow, deliberate wave, then disappeared into the smoke. "We need to get that propeller to a secure location," Harrison said urgently, "and we need to figure out who we can trust because they're inside Republic Aviation," James finished. "They've been here all along." But as they loaded the propeller into Harrison's vehicle, James couldn't shake one terrifying question. If the saboteurs wanted to stop the propeller modification, why let Catherine save it? Unless they wanted James to finish exactly what he'd started. Unless the real trap was still waiting. Harrison drove through the night, taking back roads away from the burning factory. Margaret sat in front, pressing a cloth to her reopened wound. James and Catherine huddled in the back with the propeller case, their faces illuminated by passing streetlights. "Where are we going?" James asked. "Somewhere the enemy can't follow." Harrison's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. "There's a private airfield 40 miles north. We can run tests there, away from Republic Aviation." "Assuming," Catherine said carefully, "that we can trust whoever operates that airfield." "We can't trust anyone," Margaret said. Her voice was steady now, focused. "That's what they want, to isolate us, make us paranoid." "Your wife's right," Harrison said, "which is why we're not going to the airfield." James leaned forward. "You just said—" "I said that's where we're going." Harrison turned onto a dirt road, killing the headlights. "What I didn't say is that I radioed ahead to base command, telling them exactly that. If there's a leak in command, and there is, our saboteurs will be waiting at that airfield." "Then where are we actually going?" Catherine asked. Harrison smiled grimly. "Somewhere they'd never look. Somewhere hidden in plain sight for 70 years. 30 minutes later, they pulled up to what looked like an abandoned barn outside Patchogue. Harrison led them inside, then pulled a concealed lever. A section of the floor lowered, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. "Revolutionary War smuggling tunnel," Harrison explained as they descended, "connects to 3 different locations. The British never found it. Neither will our friends. The tunnel opened into a surprisingly large underground chamber fitted with electric lights, workbenches, and, impossibly, a wind tunnel testing rig. "You've been preparing for this," James breathed. "I've been preparing since Thomas Wheeler died." Harrison began setting up equipment. "I knew someone was targeting Propeller research. I just didn't know who or why." "So you used me as bait," James said quietly. "I used everyone as bait, including myself." Harrison met his eyes. "Your father-in-law isn't just a general, James. I run a counterintelligence operation. Wheeler's death wasn't an accident. It was an assassination, and you were next on the list." Margaret stared at her father. "You knew someone would try to kill James." "I knew someone would try to stop him. I didn't know they'd go after you." Harrison's voice cracked slightly. "That was unexpected. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing and help me mount this propeller," James said, already moving toward the wind tunnel. "If we're going to risk our lives for this, let's make sure it's worth it." For the next 4 hours, they worked in silence. Catherine checked calculations. Harrison monitored airflow readings. Margaret, despite her injury, helped calibrate instruments. And James adjusted the propeller blade angles with a precision born from equal parts training and desperation. "Ready?" he finally asked. "Wait." Catherine held up a small device. "Before we test, I need to check something." She ran the device over the propeller's hub. It beeped steadily, then suddenly screeched. "What is that?" Harrison demanded. "Metallurgic scanner. I borrowed it from the materials lab." Catherine's face went pale. "There's something inside the hub. Something that shouldn't be there." James felt his blood turn to ice. "A bomb?" "Worse." Catherine pointed to the scanner's readout. "Intentional structural weakening. The hub has been chemically treated to fracture under high rotational stress, probably at around 2,400 RPM, exactly the speed we'd test it at." "The propeller from the hangar," James whispered. "Someone sabotaged it before the fire. They knew you'd save it, Catherine. They knew we'd try to test it." "Which means," Harrison said slowly, "they've been 3 steps ahead of us this entire time. Then we improvise." James grabbed a wrench and began disassembling the hub. "We rebuild it from scratch, use untreated metal, change the specifications enough that their sabotage won't matter." "That'll take days," Catherine protested. "Then we work fast." "We don't have days," Harrison said, checking his watch. "In 6 hours, there's a Joint Chiefs meeting. They're voting on whether to approve mass production of the 4-blade design, the slow design. If we don't have proof that the 2-blade works, they'll commit to inferior fighters for the rest of the war." Margaret stepped forward, her bandaged head reflecting the harsh workshop lights. "Then we have 6 hours, so stop talking and start building." What followed was a blur of metal, mathematics, and desperate hope. They worked without sleep, without breaks, racing against both time and enemies they couldn't see. At 5:47 a.m., James tightened the final bolt. "It's ready," he said quietly. Harrison powered up the wind tunnel. The propeller began to spin, slowly at first, then faster, 1,000 RPM, 1,500, 2,000. The critical speed approached, 2,400 RPM. James held his breath. The propeller held, no fractures, no failures. At 3,000 RPM, it was generating thrust coefficients they'd only dreamed of. At 3,500, it shattered every existing record. "It works," Catherine breathed. "Dear God, it actually works." We need to get this data to the Joint Chiefs," Harrison said, already reaching for the phone. But James was staring at the tunnel entrance. "We have a bigger problem." Standing at the top of the stairs, silhouetted in the dawn light, were 6 armed men. And leading them was someone James recognized, someone who'd been with Republic Aviation since the beginning. Someone they'd trusted completely. "I'm afraid," the figure said, descending the stairs with a weapon drawn, "that data won't be going anywhere, and neither will any of you." The figure stepped into the light, and James felt his world collapse. "Patterson?" Catherine's voice cracked. "But you're head of quality control." "Exactly." Frederick Patterson smiled, his weapon steady. Which means I approved every propeller that left the factory, including the ones that failed. Harrison moved protectively in front of Margaret. You sabotaged Wheeler's aircraft. Wheeler was reckless. Made the same mistake you're about to make, James. Patterson gestured to the wind tunnel. That propeller performs beautifully in controlled conditions, but in combat? Under stress? The resonance frequency will tear it apart at 15,000 feet. You're lying, James said, but doubt crept into his voice. Am I? Patterson pulled out a folder, tossing it onto the workbench. German engineering reports. The real ones, not the bait we fed you. They tried two-blade designs in 1941. 12 test pilots died before they abandoned the project. Catherine grabbed the folder, scanning rapidly. Her face went white. These failure modes, they're not in our calculations. Because they're classified. Patterson moved closer, his men fanning out around the chamber. The Army knew two-blade propellers were a dead end, but they needed someone to prove it definitively, someone expendable. So you murdered Wheeler, Harrison said flatly. Wheeler killed himself by ignoring the science, just like James is about to. Patterson's eyes fixed on James with something almost like pity. Your design is brilliant. It's also lethal. Every pilot who flies with it will be a dead man. Then why not just tell me, James demanded. Why the sabotage, the attacks, Margaret's accident? Because some men only learn through failure. And because... Patterson paused, listening. Distant engines, multiple vehicles approaching fast. Damn it! Patterson hissed. They followed us. Who followed you? Harrison's hand moved toward his pistol. The people I work for, the people who are tired of waiting. Patterson's weapon swung toward the propeller. They want that design destroyed, and they want all of you dead. The tunnel entrance exploded inward. Armed men in civilian clothes poured down the stairs, firing indiscriminately. Patterson's men returned fire, and suddenly the underground chamber became a war zone. Move! Harrison shoved Margaret behind the wind tunnel as bullets sparked off metal. James grabbed Catherine, pulling her toward a side passage. The smuggler's tunnel. It connects two other exits. What about the propeller? Catherine shouted over the gunfire. James looked back at the wind tunnel, at months of work, at the proof that could save thousands of lives. Patterson was right about one thing. It was brilliant. But was it also lethal? Leave it, Harrison roared, firing his pistol to cover their retreat. Patterson appeared through the smoke, blood streaming from a shoulder wound. You don't understand. They'll mass-produce that design, hundreds of planes, thousands of pilots. A burst of automatic fire cut him down mid-sentence. One of the attacking gunmen stepped over Patterson's body, his weapon trained on James. The propeller, now. James recognized the accent. German. This wasn't military intelligence. This wasn't counter-sabotage. This was enemy action on American soil. Run! He screamed and dragged Catherine into the darkness of the smuggling tunnel as the chamber behind them erupted in flames. But as they fled through the colonial-era passages, James clutched Patterson's folder to his chest, and one terrible question burned in his mind. What if the enemy wasn't trying to stop his design? What if they were trying to make sure America used it? The tunnel stretched endlessly, lit only by Harrison's flashlight. Margaret stumbled, and James caught her, feeling how badly she was shaking. "Keep moving," Harrison urged, glancing back toward the gunfire echoing behind them. "Where does this come out?" The nurse Catherine gasped, clutching her side. 3 exits. The barn we came from, a church basement 2 miles east, and... Harrison stopped abruptly. The tunnel ahead was blocked, not collapsed, but deliberately sealed with fresh concrete, still wet. "They knew," James whispered. "They knew about all 3 exits." "Impossible," Harrison said. "This tunnel's been secret since 1776. "Patterson knew," Margaret said quietly. "He mentioned it specifically when we arrived. Said it had been hidden for 70 years, not 200, 70. The timeline clicked in James's head. World War I. The government must have discovered it then, used it during wartime. "Which means it's in military records," Catherine finished. Records that enemy intelligence could access. Footsteps echoed from behind, voices in German, closer now. Harrison examined the concrete seal. "It's not fully set. Maybe we can break through." "No time," James said. He pulled out Patterson's folder, scanning the German engineering reports by flashlight. "Catherine, look at these failure modes. Really look." She took the documents, her eyes moving rapidly. The resonance frequency issue. Wait, these tests were all done with 4-bladed propellers, reconfigured to 2 blades. They didn't account for complete redesign from the ground up, James said urgently. Patterson was half right. Converting existing propellers is lethal. But building new ones with proper harmonic dampening would work, Catherine breathed. The Germans wanted us to think 2-blade designs were impossible. They wanted us to keep using slower, heavier 4-blade configurations. "Because their fighters are faster," Margaret added, understanding dawning. "If American planes can't catch them, they control the skies." Harrison checked his ammunition. So Patterson wasn't a traitor, he was a true believer in bad intelligence. James felt sick. "We killed a man trying to save lives based on enemy disinformation. He tried to kill us," Catherine pointed out, "because he thought we'd kill thousands. He was wrong, but he was honest." James looked at the sealed tunnel, then back toward the approaching footsteps, which means the real traitor is still out there. Someone who made sure Patterson got those false German reports. Someone who wanted this exact outcome. The German voices grew louder, more urgent, then suddenly silence. A new voice called out in perfect English, "James Holloway, I'm impressed." Few engineers would have caught the deception. James recognized that voice, recognized it from Republic Aviation's executive meetings, from classified briefings, from dinners at his own home. "No," he whispered. "Who is it?" Harrison demanded. "Someone who's been inside our operation from the beginning." James stepped toward the voice, his hands raised. "Someone who had access to Wheeler's designs, to Patterson's quality control, to the Joint Chiefs meeting schedule. Someone who could orchestrate everything." The speaker emerged from the shadows, weapon holstered, smiling pleasantly. Victor Samuelson, Republic Aviation's Director of Strategic Planning, Margaret's godfather. The man who'd recommended James for the Propeller project in the first place. "Hello, James," Victor said warmly. "I see you figured it out. Pity. I was hoping you'd die believing you'd saved the world." Margaret gasped. "Uncle Victor?" "Not your uncle, dear girl. Though I've played the role convincingly for, 15 years? Victor's smile never wavered. "The Soviet Union sends its regards." Not German, Russian, the Cold War before the Cold War even had a name. "Your NKVD, Harrison breathed. "I prefer to think of myself as a facilitator. Stalin wants America and Germany to bleed each other dry. Superior American aircraft would end the European war too quickly. Can't have that." Victor gestured to his men. "So I've spent 3 years ensuring American aviation development stays appropriately hindered." "Wheeler," James said, "you fed him the false reports." "Wheeler was too smart. Had to be eliminated. Patterson was more pliable, genuinely believed he was saving lives. And you, James," Victor's smile widened, "you were the masterpiece. Brilliant enough to solve the impossible, convinced enough to fight for it, and ultimately doomed to fail at the moment of triumph." "The Joint Chiefs meeting," Catherine said. "You're going to present James's design as evidence that experimental propellers are too dangerous. They'll approve the slower 4-blade production. And hundreds of American pilots will die in inferior aircraft," Victor confirmed cheerfully. "While Soviet intelligence gains critical years to develop our own aviation superiority. Everyone wins. Except, well, you." He drew his weapon. "But I do want to thank you, James. That propeller design, the real one with proper harmonic dampening, will serve the Soviet Air Force quite well." James's mind raced through options. The tunnel was blocked ahead, enemy agents behind, no weapons, no escape. But Catherine was looking at him with sudden understanding. She'd realized the same thing he had. The propeller was still in the underground chamber, still intact, still provable. They just had to survive long enough to get back to it. "Victor," James said slowly, "there's something you should know about that propeller design." "Oh?" Victor raised an eyebrow. "Do tell." "It's not the only one." James smiled. "Did you really think I'd put all my calculations in one place?" Victor's expression flickered just for a moment, but it was enough. Harrison moved. Harrison's pistol cleared its holster in a fraction of a second, firing twice. Victor's men dropped, but Victor himself was faster, diving behind the tunnel's support beam as return fire shattered the flashlight. Darkness swallowed everything. "Go!" Harrison roared, firing blindly to provide cover. James grabbed Margaret and Catherine, pulling them back toward the sealed concrete. In the pitch black, with gunfire echoing like thunder, he felt along the wall desperately. "Here!" Catherine found a side passage, barely wide enough for a person. "Revolutionary-era escape route." They squeezed through as bullets sparked off stone. The narrow passage twisted sharply, then opened into a wider chamber. Dim light filtered through cracks above, dawn breaking through the barn floor overhead. Harrison tumbled through last, breathing hard. "That won't stop them long." "We don't need long." James pulled out Patterson's lighter, examining the chamber. Old wooden support beams, dry rot. And critically, directly beneath the barn's fuel storage. "You're not serious," Catherine said, reading his intention. "The propeller's still in the underground workshop. If we collapse this tunnel, we seal Victor's men inside. They can't destroy the evidence. We'll also seal ourselves in," Margaret pointed out. "Not if we go up." James pointed to the rotted floorboards above. "Through the barn. We get to Harrison's vehicle, drive straight to the Joint Chiefs meeting with the test data." "And if Victor's already destroyed the propeller?" Harrison asked. "Then we testify anyway. Tell them everything. Let them search the ruins." James met each of their eyes. "It's not perfect, but it's the only move we have." Catherine pulled out her notebook, tearing out pages of calculations. "Take these, backup data. If something happens to the propeller, this proves the design works." Margaret grabbed the pages, stuffing them inside her jacket. "When you say collapse the tunnel, I mean explosion." James indicated the fuel lines running through the ceiling. "We rupture those, ignite them, and the barn comes down on top of the tunnel entrance." "Burying Victor and his men alive," Harrison said quietly. "They're enemy combatants on American soil. Spies. Murderers." James's voice hardened. "This is war. We just haven't declared it yet." Voices below. "Russian now, not German." Victor coordinating his men. 30 seconds, Harrison said, positioning himself at the narrow passage. "I'll hold them while you rig the charges." "Dad," Margaret started. "No arguments." Harrison checked his remaining ammunition. "Someone needs to get that data to Washington. Can't be me. I'm already compromised. Victor will have people watching for me." "Then we all go together," James said firmly. "I've got a better idea." He pulled off his oil-stained engineer's jacket, stuffing it with debris and Patterson's folder, the false German reports. "Victor thinks these documents are critical. He'll want them intact." Understanding dawned on Catherine's face. "You're going to make him choose, chase us or secure the evidence." "Exactly." James positioned the jacket near the fuel lines. "Harrison, when I give the signal, shoot the fuel line. The explosion will drop the barn and seal the tunnel. Victor will assume we died in the collapse." "And we're where exactly?" Margaret asked. "Running like hell toward that church exit." James pointed to a second narrow passage, barely visible in the dim light. "The one that's not sealed because Victor assumed we'd panic and take the direct route." Harrison smiled grimly. "The old double bluff. I taught you well. You taught me to think 3 moves ahead." James clasped his father-in-law's shoulder. "Let's hope Victor only thinks 2. The voices grew closer, Victor's calm tones cutting through the darkness. "James, there's nowhere to run. Be reasonable. I can offer you a position in the Soviet program. Think of the resources, the freedom to create." "Now!" James shouted. Harrison fired. The fuel line ruptured with a hiss. James lit Patterson's lighter and threw it. The explosion was deafening. They ran through the side passage as the tunnel behind them collapsed in a roar of timber and stone. Dirt rained down. The air filled with smoke and dust. For a terrible moment, James thought the entire tunnel system would collapse, burying them all. Then they burst through into the church basement, coughing and bloody, but alive. Morning light streamed through the stained glass windows above. "Move," Harrison gasped. "If Victor survived, he'll regroup and come after us." They climbed the stairs, emerging into the small rural church. Empty pews, quiet sanctuary. The normalcy felt surreal after the violence below. "Vehicles 2 blocks north," Harrison said, checking his watch. "Joint Chiefs meeting starts in 90 minutes. We can make it if the church doors burst open." Victor Samuelson stood silhouetted against the morning sun, covered in dust and blood, but very much alive. His weapon was raised, and behind him 3 of his men took positions. "I really wish you hadn't done that," Victor said conversationally. "The tunnel collapse killed 2 of my best operatives. I'll have to file very tedious reports." "It's over, Victor," James said. "The Joint Chiefs will know everything." "Will they?" Victor smiled. "Know what?" "That a disgraced engineer made wild accusations, that a rogue general ran an illegal counterintelligence operation, that experimental propeller tests resulted in multiple deaths." He shook his head. "No one will believe you. I've spent 3 years building credibility. You've spent 3 weeks building paranoia." He was right. James realized with sinking certainty that without physical proof, without the propeller, they had nothing but conspiracy theories and dead bodies. "However," Victor continued, "I am a sporting man, so I'll make you an offer. Give me Catherine's calculations, the real ones, not the decoys, and I'll let the rest of you walk away. The Soviet Union gets the design, America keeps its inferior fighters, and you live to engineer another day." "And Catherine?" James asked. "Comes with me. Brilliant minds are rare. Stalin appreciates talent, regardless of nationality." Catherine stepped forward, her voice steady. "I'll go." "No," James started. "Yes." She looked at him with fierce determination. "You'll get the test data to the Joint Chiefs, prove the design works, save thousands of lives. That's more important than one engineer." "How touching," Victor said dryly. "But I'm afraid it's not quite that simple. You see, I lied. I'm not actually giving you a choice." He raised his weapon, aimed directly at Margaret. "The calculations, James. Or she dies. You have 5 seconds." Harrison moved to shield his daughter, but Victor's men had their weapons trained. No angle, no shot, no options. James looked at Catherine, at Margaret, at the life he'd built and the future he'd imagined. Then at the calculations in Margaret's jacket, the proof that could change the course of the war. 4 seconds. The church bells began to toll. 8 o'clock. The hour of the Joint Chiefs meeting. 3 seconds. James pulled the calculations from Margaret's jacket and held them up. "Smart boy," Victor said. "Now bring them." The church's side door crashed open. Military police flooded in, weapons drawn, led by, impossibly, Lieutenant Colonel Stanton, his chest wrapped in bandages but very much alive. "Nobody move," Stanton commanded. "Victor Samuelson, you're under arrest for espionage, murder and treason." Victor's confident smile finally cracked. "That's impossible. You died in the fire." "Apparently I'm harder to kill than you thought." Stanton nodded to his men, who moved in to disarm Victor and his agents. "Also harder to fool. I've been investigating Republic Aviation's security breaches for 6 months. You've been on my list from the beginning." James felt reality shifting again. "You knew the whole time." "I knew someone was sabotaging American aviation. Didn't know who until tonight." Stanton looked at Harrison. "Your father-in-law contacted me after your hangar meeting, said you'd walked into a trap. We've been coordinating ever since." "The fire," Margaret breathed. "The body they found. A German agent we'd captured 3 days prior, already dead. We used his body to make Victor think I was eliminated." Stanton turned to Victor, who stood frozen between MPs. But we needed you to reveal your network, needed you to mobilize your full resources, and you did, trying to stop a propeller design that would win the war. Victor's face twisted with rage and something like admiration. Clever, but you've already lost. Even if James's design works, the Joint Chiefs meet in 1 hour. Without physical proof, they'll vote for the four-blade design, and I've already ensured that vote will pass. About that, Stanton said, checking his watch. The meeting was rescheduled for noon. Plenty of time to retrieve the test propeller from the underground workshop, assuming it survived your little explosion. James's heart raced. Is it intact? Don't know yet. That's why we need to go. Now. Stanton gestured to the door where military vehicles waited. We've got 4 hours to save American aviation. Think you can mount a propeller in 4 hours, engineer? James looked at Catherine, at Margaret, at the calculations they'd risked everything to protect. Then he smiled. 3 hours, and I'll throw in the test flight for free.